Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I do want to say what an honor it was to be a member of Introduction Knoxville in the winter 2024 class. Also the best class of Introduction Knoxville. We survived snowpocalypse, so I think that qualifies us for that. I don't think that's me. I want to say a little bit about the Institute of American Civics. In 2022, bipartisan majorities of Tennessee's 112th General Assembly created the Institute. Legislators from both parties spoke in favor of the Institute's mission to strengthen civic knowledge and revive civility and respect for opposing viewpoints. Housed within the Baker School of Public Policy, the new Baker School of Public Policy and Public Affairs at the University of Tennessee, the IAC reaches Tennesseans through courses, continuing education for teachers, and public events. This afternoon, we have the privilege of hearing from Alexandra Hudson, a speaker we are delighted to sponsor. She's a writer, speaker, and adjunct professor at Indiana University's Lilly School of Philanthropy. She has been a Novak Journalism Fellow and contributes to leading news outlets such as CBS, CBS News, The Wall Street Journal, and Time Magazine. She earned her master's degree in public policy at the London School of Economics as a Rotary Scholar, and she's the founder of Civic Renaissance, an intellectual community passionate about infusing beauty, goodness, and truth into our public discourse. Hudson knows the power of storytelling and narration. Her 12-part televisual series, Storytelling and the Human Condition, is an arresting tour of how the narrative tradition helps us understand who we are and our place in the world. Hudson believes that civility is the key to bridging divisions in our increasingly polarized and divided society. Her experience in politics taught her that there was a fundamental difference between politeness and civility. Through the power of storytelling, her best-selling book, The Soul of Civility, Timeless Principles to Heal Society and Ourselves, in it she shares how we can live together across deep differences and still engage in difficult but productive debate and disagreement. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Alexandra Hudson to Knoxville.
Hi everyone, my name is Alexandra Hudson. So thrilled to be with you here today. I want to thank First Bank and Nathan. I want to thank Josh from the Institute of American Civics and Tammy from Leadership Knoxville for having me. A true honor and a privilege to be with you here today, speaking about the most important question of our day. How do we flourish across deep difference? I know this is the most important question for reasons that I'll share with you a little bit about my story, how I came to be interested in this topic, but this is an essential question for democracies around the world. I just got back from a book tour in England and in France, and I had the privilege of speaking with the English House of Lords, where we talked about the future of democracy. As half the globe this year goes to the polls, a historically high number, we're also facing unprecedented threats to democracy, from hyperpartisanship to polarization to the rise of political violence. And so today we'll talk about the urgency of this problem, also the timelessness of this problem, the timelessness of the solution, which is civility, and we'll conclude by exploring what we can each do to be a part of the solution right here, right now, which is why I love the motto of this year's Leadership Knoxville Luncheon: lead where you live. I love that. So I came to my interest in this topic, honestly. I'm really grateful my mother is here. She's called Judy, the manners lady. Imagine being raised by the manners lady. And I actually learned while writing this book, my mother is one of 4 women, possibly more, there are probably more out there, who are internationally renowned experts in manners and etiquette, named Judy. There are 4 of them. One of the most prominent is named Judith Martin, who's at the Washington Post, a long-time syndicated columnist there. But there are many things that makes my mother more than just a run-of-the-mill Judith in the etiquette industry. She has a great kids album that you might be interested in looking at up online, and I sing 2 songs on her album. And she's also unbelievably gracious and hospitable and lives her life transforming outsider into insider, stranger into friend, and she makes the world a warmer and more gentle place to live. So really grateful to her example in that way. But I remember growing up, my mother would ask my brothers and I, to mind our P's and Q's, how to set the table, how to shake hands and look people in the eye. And I remember I am constitutionally allergic to authority. I hate rules. I hate being told what to do. Even to this day, someone tells me to do something and I want to know why. I always hungered growing up for a sort of moral and philosophical underpinning for why we do things the way we do them. But I generally followed these norms and proprieties my mother expected us to do because she promised they would work well for me in school and work and life. And she was right. Until I found myself in federal government. I served in Washington, D.C., 2017 to 2018, a rather divided time in our world and especially in our country. And my experience was a microcosm of the deep divisions in our world today. I saw these two extremes when I was in government. On one hand, there was a contingent that was hostile, bellicose, belligerent. These are people who were willing to steamroll and silence and bully anyone into submission to get what they wanted. I knew to stay away from those people. On the other hand, there were people who at first I thought were my people. They were polished and poised and polite, but these are the people who would smile and flatter me and others one moment and stab us in the back the next. And this second contingent deeply perplexed me. My mother had said growing up that manners were an outward expression of our inward character. And yet here I was surrounded by people who were well-mannered and polished and polite, and yet ruthless and cruel. This experience clarified for me that there is an essential distinction between civility and politeness. I realized that there's more, that politeness is etiquette and manners, and it's a technique, it's external, whereas civility is an internal disposition of the heart. It's a way of seeing others as our moral equals, worthy of dignity and respect, just by virtue of our shared moral status as members of the human community. I love this quote from Howard H. Baker: "Have a genuine and decent respect for differing points of view." Why do we respect differing points of view? Because we respect the people that hold those views, beings with dignity and inherent moral worth. So I realized this essential distinction between civility and politeness, and I fled government. I left government to write this book, and I began researching and writing about this topic and layering that, texturizing my own experience, being raised by the manners lady. And I realized actually that while this is the most important question of our day, this is also a timeless human problem. This is not even a question of, this is the central question of democracy and the classical liberal project. How do we peacefully coexist across differing visions of the good and values? But this is also a timeless human question, because as human beings, we are defined by two competing forces: love of others and love of self. We know we become fully human in relationship with others. We achieve our potential individually and collectively only in relationship with others, and yet, morally and biologically, we are driven to meet our own needs before others. And these two facets of who we are in tension. And they've always been a threat to the good life, to friendship, to community, to human flourishing, as long as we've been around as human beings. I love the story. Raise your hand if you're familiar with the story of the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Anyone read this in school literature? Not too many of you, a few of you. I love how illustrative this story is of this duality in our human nature that is the timeless cause of our civility problem. Dr. Jekyll is an illustrious, prestigious, beloved local leader and physician in Scotland, in Edinburgh. But he struggles with these temptations, these baser lusts and desires. And he finally devises a plan to, he creates a potion that he drinks at night, which transforms him in secret into the barbaric, monstrous, evil Mr. Hyde. And so by night, he's able to animate and give life to his baser desires in secret, and hurts people, robs people, wreaks havoc on the society. And then by day, he's able to maintain his pristine reputation. But something rather unfortunate begins to happen. The more frequently that Dr. Jekyll drinks this potion voluntarily and involuntarily transforms into Mr. Hyde, soon he begins to transform spontaneously, even without drinking the potion. And soon he eventually, permanently becomes Mr. Hyde. And Robert Louis Stevenson writes, "It cannot be said that Jekyll was either purely Jekyll or purely Hyde, because man is not just one, he is inherently two, friend and fiend, love of others, love of self." This tension is timeless. But so is the solution, and the solution is civility, which is not just mere politeness, not just mere manners. It's the art of human flourishing. It is the bare minimum of respect that we are owed and owe to others by virtue of our shared personhood and dignity. Civility respects and loves others enough to even tell hard truths, engage in robust debate. It's the duty of citizenship, which is the etymological root of our word civility, that demands truth-telling, that demands having conversations that might be uncomfortable, risking offending others, that we need, and that's the core argument of my book, that we shouldn't settle for mere politeness in our world today, but we should instead aspire to actually respect people and embody the value of true civility. And these principles of civility are also remarkably timeless. Did you know that the oldest book in the world is a civility book? It's given to us from ancient Egypt, 2350 BC, over 4,000 years ago, written by an advisor to the ancient pharaoh in ancient Egypt named Ptahhotep. Ptahhotep was a leader himself. He had reached the pinnacle of political and the business world and worldly power. He was even offered the opportunity to become pharaoh, which he turned down in order to retire and live a quiet life in tranquility. And while he was in retirement, he reflected on the stuff of the good life and the timeless principles of human flourishing. And he wrote that down in writing as a gift to Pharaoh's son in hopes it would help him be a wise and just ruler. And in these maxims, in these teachings of Ptahhotep that comprise the oldest book in the world, they are remarkably timeless. They could be in a Judith Martin Miss Manners Washington Post column today. They're conventional wisdom, things that we all know to be true. Ptahhotep writes, "Do not be good to your friends and your neighbors just when you need something. Be good to them all the time, just because they're your friends and neighbors. Do not gossip, don't slander, don't malign someone behind their back," Ptahhotep writes. "Do not abuse a power differential," Ptahhotep writes. These and many others of the 37 maxims I encourage you to go look up and read for your own. It's available on Amazon. Are found time and time again across time and place. Sometimes people independently came to these ideas by just observing the human condition and saying what works when it comes to doing life well together across difference and what detracts from the human social project. Let's do more of what works, less of what doesn't. So timeless problem, timeless solution. What can we do? It's really easy to look around us and feel overwhelmed by the magnitude of this problem. And the reality is, I learned firsthand, we can do a lot more than we realize. When I decided to leave government, I came home from work one day and said to my husband, "I'm done with DC, I'm done with politics, I'm done with the swamp. Let's move to Indiana," I said. And Indiana is where he's from originally, it's where we still live. My husband said, "Okay, sounds good, we'll move to Indiana." No take-backs. And a few months later, we moved out there. We've been there 6 years now. One of my first friends, when we moved to Indiana, came up to me after church one day and said, "Hi, I'm Joanna Taft. Would you like to porch with us sometime?" And I had never heard the word porch used as a verb before. We were curious, we didn't know many people in town, and we went to her home that day, and I realized that Joanna is staging a quiet revolution against our atomized, divided, lonely, alienated, broken status quo. She had curated people on her porch that day, across politics, across race, across geography, across class, not to have structured dialogue across difference, but to just be seen and known and loved in the fullness of who we are as human beings. And over the course of writing this book, I traveled the country and realized that there are thousands of people doing the exact same thing with and without front porches. They're using coffee shops, they are using their front stoops, their front lawns, supper clubs. They're using, it's not about what people have, it's about how they're using what they do have, and employing and cultivating the disposition of civility and choosing to make their lives, their homes, what they do have, an oasis from the division, and creating places where people can be seen and known and loved in the fullness of who we are, and that we can do that too, every single one of us. We can't change the world, but we can change ourselves. And the more of us that choose to reclaim the soul of civility in our everyday, in ways great and small, we might be able to change the world. And so I'm very grateful to every single one of you for making time to be here today and to reflect on this essential question of our day. Thank you again to Josh and Marianne at the Baker School, and again to Tammy and everyone who and Nathan again at First Bank, and everyone who made this event possible. And again to each of you, I hope that you leave today realizing that you each have way more power to be a part of the solution than you realize. So thrilled to be here, and thank you so much for having me.
Lexi, thank you so much for that inspiring talk. I do want to maybe push back with a couple of questions here that I'm certain you have heard before, but sometimes people will argue that if others aren't civil to you, that you really shouldn't be civil in response to them, that it's irrational, that a kind of universal disarmament makes no sense, particularly if there are significant stakes on the line. You must have heard this in Washington, D.C. Look, there are big policy issues that are very important, and if we don't respond in kind, we're going to lose. Now, I assume that you think that position is incorrect. Why?
It's a great question, Josh, and you're absolutely right that there is this increasing tenor and ethos of apocalypticism in our public discourse, in our world today, and just an overarching sense that the stakes are incredibly high, and we have to be willing to do and say whatever is necessary in order to beat the other side, in order to win. It feels existential. It feels essential. And one argument I make in my book, in fact, this is where the title, "The Soul of Civility" in my book comes from, is we insufficiently appreciate the way that when we hurt others, through our maliciousness, through our unkindness, through even acts of violence. We're seeing increasing acts of violence in our world today. Clausewitz said that war is politics by their means. And today, as our methods of deliberative discourse are breaking down, we're seeing an increase of war, of violence back on the table, which is deeply concerning. So we insufficiently appreciate that when we engage in these sort of methods that instrumentalize others, that see people as pawns in the way between us and our goals, we do not just hurt and dehumanize others. We hurt ourselves too. And it was actually during a close rereading of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail while I was at retreat. I was on a retreat with the Aspen Institute while I was in government, thinking about these ideas while I was living through this deep division. And this is what's beautiful about reading a great classic text. You bring to it different parts of different ideas because of where you are in life, and you can always glean new things out of it. And what really struck me about this rereading of Dr. King's work was when he's talking about segregation. He says segregation actually hurts both parties. It hurts the segregated by giving them a false sense of superiority, and the segregator by giving them a false sense of inferiority. But it deforms both souls mutually. And I realize the same is true about incivility. That when we hurt others, when we're through acts of cruelty and malice and vitriol, we don't just hurt them, we make ourselves less human and less humane as well. But the inverse is also true. Acts of charity, grace, hospitality, civility are mutually ennobling. They humanize the other, and they humanize us as well.
Wonderful. So since your book was released, you've traveled across the country. Now you're traveling overseas as well, visiting a range of communities. you must see other communities that are concerned about the same questions that we're here concerned with in Knoxville to build a strong civic culture, a civil culture. Are there particular communities that are doing this effectively and that we perhaps in Knoxville could look to for examples of how we could do some of the things they're doing to strengthen our community?
It's a great question. I am getting contacted weekly by city managers, local mayor's office, city council persons, school superintendents, principals who are saying, how do I instantiate the ideals of your book in our community? And one particular champion of the book that has been doing this is Jeff Worrell. He's a city council person in Carmel, Indiana. I don't know if you guys have seen Parks and Rec before, but I actually watched all of Parks and Rec when I first moved to Indiana. It's about a tiny little town in the city politics, Parks and Rec community there, to orient myself there. And in Parks and Rec, there's a duality, a sort of rivalry between Pawnee, Indiana, and Carmel. Carmel's like, and Eagleton. And Eagleton's like streets are paved with gold, and there's this funny rivalry. And it was kind of funny when Jeff from Carmel, Indiana reached out to me, because I live in Indianapolis where my garbage doesn't get picked up and the roads aren't paved. And yet here was Carmel with streets paved with gold. They're, I thought, the biggest, reaching out to me about this issue. And I thought their biggest concerns were battle over art installations at the roundabouts. But anyway, so what they've done is started a whole civility campaign. They have a civility pledge that's not for leaders, it's for citizens, saying this is what we're expecting of ourselves and of our leaders, which is great. He actually had a hard time getting leaders to sign on to any sort of pledge, but he didn't get a hard time getting massive community support. We're now in Carmel schools and doing work with the community, with the teachers and parents that send their kids to school as well. And it's just, this is the power of one person to see potential and to see a need in their community. And I'm honored that he saw my book as a tool to help him facilitate this.
Well, thank you so much for your insights on civility. This is, I think, an inspiring talk, and we appreciate your answers here. So now it's going to be my pleasure to introduce the Leadership Knoxville Board Chair, Jerry Bodie. He has the honor himself to introduce our last special presentation. So let's bring him out, representing the LK class of 2005. Please join me in welcoming Jerry Bodie.